if you're a big company, you maybe have 10, 20,000 people in your organization that have stories to tell, that have life experience. There's so many good stories in there. And, bringing those stories to life, that is the essence of your organization. Because in the end, we can all have the same great tools. Every company in the end can use staff-based. That makes it really easy to have the foundational level. But then the content that goes in, there should be a human touch to it. And that's the people in your organization, right?
Hi, and welcome to You've Got Comms, the podcast for IC pros shaping the future of work. And I'm Emma Fischer, staff-based content marketing manager and your host for today. So in this episode, we're diving into one of the fastest growing internal communications tools, and that is corporate podcasts. So who better to join me today than Maximilian Conrad, or Max, the co-founder and CEO of Hypecast. And Max and I actually already did this one time. However, we thought it was audio. It's also video, and our lights went out. So we're really happy for our unofficial second go today, in which I can correct your bio now. And you are not a lifelong audio nerd. We're going to say lifelong audio enthusiast,
Yes.
part-time podcaster, startup founder, and a really cool guy, I'd have to say. And I would love to hear in your words, what do you guys do at Hypecast?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Emma, for having us. Yeah, that's when you get into like real life podcasting. There's always many variables that you have to take care of, and well, we kind of messed up on that one. So thanks for doing this again. Well, what do we do at Hypecast? So we focus on corporate audio, but if you want to do a broader scope of what we do, is really all about stakeholder communication. So nowadays, how do I engage better with the different stakeholders that I have in my organization, internally, externally, and then reach them in an authentic way, in a very personal way, to really get your messages across, because that's what companies struggle with nowadays. And yeah, that's why we founded Hypecast, to consult you on that, to help you create the right formats, and then in the end, as an underlying kind of like infrastructure, build the entire software. So it's the software that we're recording this podcast episode on as well. So that's what we mainly do, and then help your company find a voice.
It's pretty cool because now I could see both parts of it, because we first recorded in the podcasting van, which I really like this experience. And you can check my LinkedIn. There's proof we did this. And
Yes.
now we get to do it on this platform. So I like seeing both sides of that. And this is a perfect intro, because I'd love to get started today with the case for corporate audio. So we live in a time where even political candidates are on podcasts, and things have changed so much, I'd say. When did you start it? A decade ago, or first get into podcasts? Like, I think there's been so much change. Why would you say so many companies now turn to internal podcasts? And how is that kind of changing the way we receive information?
I think overall, podcasting has now turned into a mainstream medium. And there's some studies that were just released a couple of weeks ago, around that now more than 50% of Americans listen to a podcast at least once a month. So it's more than half of the population. We're seeing growing numbers across Europe, Asia, everywhere. Now one of the biggest markets as well, Brazil. So podcast is now a mainstream medium, and usually what happens when mainstream media is established, it moves into this corporate world. We have seen that with video. We've seen that with social media. Now, like Staffbase is a social internet platform, and we started off with social media. So we started off with Facebook and all those kinds of things. It's the same with, we all started off on, like, the older generation started off on ICQ, and now we have Slack, or we have Teams, and those kind of things. So once a medium is established enough, it moves into the corporate world, and that's what we're seeing with podcasting as well. And it's moving into the corporate world for the same reasons why we love podcast as an individual. It's very authentic. It's very close to the ear, and then it's very intimate. And why do people listen to podcasts? It's to get information, to be updated on the latest news, and to be entertained. And so that's the same way we want to consume information from our organization. We're tired of the 175th email a day that we can't really manage anymore. And then compared to video, which is a big thing now for a lot of people, I think James Critland from Pod News said it really well. Um, Podcasts are always great, or audio in general is always great. It is the tool for your ears while the eyes are being busy. So it's a medium that you can consume passively while managing other tasks, while commuting, while taking a lunch break. And then think about organizations, and that's the big thing. We're trying to reach people in organizations now as well that are non-desk workers, especially in Germany, but a lot of other countries as well. A lot of organizations generally think about their HQ when they think about what kind of tools we need, how do we engage people. But for a lot of companies, if you think about auto manufacturers, the smallest amount of people, or retailers, the smallest amount of people works in HQ. The rest works distributed non-desk jobs. So they don't have an email, they don't have a screen. How do I reach them? How do I engage with them? So audio is a great way of doing that, because you have your phone in your pocket and can listen to a podcast easily while doing something else. So that those are a number of reasons why podcasts move into the corporate world.
I love what you said about the passive consumption because I'm really into cinema and I saw like some other cinema people, they were commenting on the forum. So many people these days are used to passive consumption that they kind of just want to not look at a movie and then they miss all of the things in films that are not being said. Like people are like, I'm really confused watching this film. They're like, well, you were on your phone the whole time and you're only listening to the dialogue. So it's like you're tapping into how that can actually work to kind of cater to people where they're at. I do think people should get back into focusing on things, but not all the time. Like sometimes you're like, hey, I'm doing something. Maybe you're out working and you can listen to this podcast. I listen to them when I'm doing my makeup or commuting.
And that's a very good point. We always say, so now you have a toolbox of things. So there's groups of people and there's messages that are great and work well in written form. There's great things that you can do via video, and there's great things you can do audio only. So the example of video is always the reference that I use. So I don't know. What's your favorite movie?
The Shining.
The Shining. So
Yeah.
The Shining probably works really well because you have the visual component to it, because it can create this, scenery. Would it work as an audio only? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. But if you
My other favorite, Paris, Texas. No, if you're not watching that film, you're
exactly,
just like, what's happening?
and then if you think about the Marvel movies, if you think about James Bond, there's so many movies where you need that visual component to kind of like get the whole story. Those blockbuster movies, but then think about like your evening news. Think about a talk show. You don't need video for that. Like you can listen to the conversations that people have, like a talk show. That works really well in audio only. And if companies take that into consideration, understand each channel that they kind of like catering to, then they would understand, hey, there's a few things we don't need the 9 o'clock, you know, video conference from the CEO where everybody has to attend, because you can do it first of all on demand. You can do it audio only, and then people, can consume it on their own time, and you don't, get everybody, like 80,000 people in your organization, to join a video call at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. You don't have to, because that usually upsets people instead of bringing them closer together, right? But then there's moments where it's a town hall, where it's a video message that you need for product presentations, for example, or other stuff. So always make sure that you get the right message for the right channel.
I really like something else you've said, which is that podcasting is the most human channel. And I do copywriting, and in corporate copywriting, I can't put my personality. Like it's not about me, it's about the brand always. But I do think podcasting, like a CEO shouldn't enter a podcast, you can correct me, with like media training. I think it's probably better if they're giving a message to their company that they're being authentic. So what problems do you think that podcasting can kind of solve for people by offering this unique platform?
I, again, I think we have to start a bit earlier in that chain. I think if you look at Gen Z now, when they decide to work for a company, it's not the brand name or the company logo on the big building. Is, does senior leadership have the same values as me? Do they have certain, you know, convictions about certain topics? Are they like are they representative of me as a person? And then it doesn't really matter if there's a, what kind of logo is on the building. And so that's what companies need to understand. So yes, you're right. You can't go in with just media training and giving you the marketing communications talk. You need to be authentic. You need to be honest. You need to be open. And that's what podcasts are really good for. Like that's why those where people are just chatting work really well still, where it's just no topic and then people randomly talk together. It's the most human form of connection, right? Where you have just an honest conversation. So that's what people kind of always opt for, is like, can we just have an honest conversation? And that's what a podcast is great for. And then like if you think about it in a corporate world, I think it's also a paradigm shift that needs to happen, where where nowadays we're all focused on external, and then we do an external first and then we kind of use that for internal. But think about building your messaging and being authentic and building your narrative and everything from an inside out view, where I start with the closest people to me, which most of the time is my employees. And usually they're also the most critical of, because they know what's going on and they know that not everything is fluff, that not everything is going well. They know how much you struggle to get a new product shipped, and all the bullshit that happened beforehand. So then you get the message right. Then you already, if you convince your people internally, you have ambassadors that go out and kind of like are becoming brand ambassadors on the outside world. And also you kind of get your message right, and can really be convincingly authentic, and find your own personality and find your own voice, and then go to the outside world, and then sit on a podcast or in talk show and talk the way you kind of learned it from the inside out perspective. And podcasts are a great way of doing that. And then they're not live, so you can always edit if something didn't go the way you wanted it to go.
What I really like is the authenticity, because I don't know if this is controversial, but I am personally really sick of LinkedIn messages, and they're all like in this little formula. It's like first line, and then it's like line, 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 line. Like when I first joined the company and I was like active on LinkedIn, I'm like showed they don't want paragraphs, things are like this, this, this. And it does perform better. But at one point you're like, oh my gosh, like I just want someone to say something instead of having to like craft it. So when it comes to authenticity, what advice could you give for something that's like, this is an authentic podcast and this is like check a box? Because I think sometimes things come across as really staged if someone's trying too hard to be authentic, but it's trained. Was it just like you go in kind of blindly, or is there any other advice?
I, I think like from a content creation perspective, stop writing scripts. Stop writing scripts. Have your notes down, have your bullet points down that you want to discuss. You know, beforehand, the way we did, hey, we're recording something, like you told me, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. So I have a chance to kind of prepare and give you, like, come up with, what is interesting that we want to talk about. So we kind of have a few talking points, and then within that we have an open conversation, and maybe one of the topics doesn't make it into the episode because we're keeping a very organic conversation going. And that's the main thing when it comes to content creation. Like, don't write everything down. Have your talking points ready. That's the one thing. And I think the other part is, and you mentioned it, and I like it very much when you say, like, this performs really well, and and it follows a certain formula. But then it's all based on the KPIs you're looking at, and usually in social media, the KPIs that we all look for is impressions, and so reaching high numbers of people. But I think we need, again, to rethink what are the relevant KPIs. Is it like maximum reach of my content, or is it maximum engagement within the community that I'm trying to reach? So, if I'm building a niche product or a special interest product, um, it might be fine. Like, if I want to create a podcast for, the CEO of like every S&P 500 company, my audience will only be 500 people, or and maybe a few more, because but it's not going to be 10,000. But I'm catering to a specific audience, and then building content for those people, What are they interested in? Interact with your community to really build product or a conversation that is close to your audience. Is a great way of doing that. So understand your audience, build something that is for a specific audience. Don't focus on maximizing reach, but maximizing engagement within your audience, and then get rid of transcripts or scripts for your podcast and just have talking points. I think those are just a few things. And then, of course, um, it won't happen from episode one. It's practice. So persistence, and repetition, and then ideation. Those are kind of like the things that's when you get really good at something. I recorded my first podcast episode 2015, I think. When I go back and listen to it, I feel like, oh my god, what was I doing? And now people say like, "Oh, you have such a great voice for podcasting and you're so good in it." Yeah, because I've probably on my own recorded over 300 or 400 podcast episodes. I didn't start off that way. So, it's about repetition, training yourself, and then finding your voice along the way. So get started, don't go for the 100%, do the 80% and, keep going.
I know we had, for our other podcast, a former Barack Obama speechwriter on, and he said that, he's amazing. His name is Terry, and he has a book, Say It Well. And he was like,
Yeah.
even Barack Obama wasn't born this naturally gifted speaker. So that's what I think. I'm like, okay, if Barack Obama learned to become a speaker, then I think a lot of us can because he's such an incredible speaker.
100%, 100%. Not just the speaking on its own, but I think speaking with your own voice is the thing. Like, don't follow a formula. Trying to figure out who you are as a person, what really makes you stand out, what are your convictions again, what are you kind of like the things that you stand for, that you value, and build that into your conversation. And then that brings out the way you talk, the way kind of like what kind of references do you use, what kind of like sayings do you use, and that really makes it personal to you, and that makes it then authentic, and that's what makes it stick in people's heads. It's not the well crafted AI written email that everybody has. Then you're going to be average, and then your message is going to be average, and people are going to treat it that way. But if you want to stick out, just find your voice. And I think especially with leadership communications, there's a lot of people out there, CEOs and senior leadership, that really need to work on not, fitting into this kind of like structure that we have, but, developing a style. The way you develop a management style, the same way you need to develop a communication style that works for you. Maybe you're an introvert. Yeah, then find the way of still making it work. If you're an extrovert, yeah, do something else.
Yeah, I was watching the newest John Oliver episode and they were talking about, I can't even think of the word, but it's like AI spam basically, and like so much stuff on Instagram, on social media. It's
Yeah,
AI now, and how the regulations are allowing this. And I think one of the best ways we can rebel against that, or rebel against, hey, the LinkedIn algorithm is so repetitive. Well, we can change that. Like you said, are we looking at the
yeah.
right metrics for success? And we always have the choice. And one thing that now stands out to me about podcasting through this conversation is it's kind of more evergreen content, because if you're jumping on a trend to do an image or a meme, like I even suggested at one point, like the White Lotus, but we have to put this out right now because the White Lotus is hot. Next week, it's not. But if you have a podcast episode, you can kind of tune in at any point and listen to people talking about a subject. So I think it stands up better over time, especially because it's not trying too hard.
I had a conversation with our director of consulting yesterday, and we were talking about, you know, like with blockbuster movies, you create a moment in time, and that's hot, and that runs for a couple of days or weeks. But if you think about like a TV show or a series that has substance, that is well thought out, like I don't know, Game of Thrones, Stranger Things,
Sopranos.
Sopranos, they might be out of the conversation for a little bit, but they continue to stay in our minds. That's kind of like how I see podcasts as a series that is never really like super super flashy and hot, but that continues to stick in your head, and that builds the relationship, and then that really helps you get your message across, because it's again about repetition. It's about, keeping people engaged, and so that is one thing that I see as a valid point for podcasting as well. And it's also a little bit of maybe a counter culture to, where we're now saying like the attention span on TikTok is down to 1.2 seconds. So you need to cram the hook into the first 1.2 seconds so people will just swipe across your video, and that's not working with podcasts. So if you go into podcasts, people generally listen to on average 45 minutes to an episode. So think about how many TikTok videos you need to create, how many Instagram postings you need to create to engage somebody with your brand or your content for 45 minutes straight. That's nearly impossible because people are also looking for this deep dive, this conversation, this also having, where sometimes the conversation runs off a little bit, and it's just, not just crammed into like 2 minutes, super substantial information, and where everybody's like, "We need to condense the information. We need to pack more information in 1 minute." Yeah, but people not gonna consume more information because you just crammed it into a smaller space. You just made it so tight that it feels like it's gonna burst and nobody's gonna remember anything. So give them a chance to, learn something, because you don't do your master's degree in 45 minutes. You spend, a few years on it because you kind of need to get into the groove. And so that's the same with podcasting, I would say.
And then when you have that 45-minute episode, you have all this opportunity for repurposing.
Yes.
So could you explain that for a minute? If someone's like, "Hey, I want to try this," like what do? You don't just take that 45-minute podcast. There's other things you can do.
Yeah, exactly. So we're recording video, audio, right? So we know video generally attention spans rank from 1.5 to 2.5 minutes. So probably because we are doing a great podcast, everybody will stay in for like, the duration of this podcast, the 40 minutes that we're gonna do, and they love you as a host. So that's different, but usually it's 1.5, 2 minutes. But so we're gonna have probably a ton of great snippets that we can repurpose from this video that you can use as short-form video to get attention to a certain topic that we're talking about, or kind of get people hooked on, hey, if you're interested in this topic, you can do the long version, and you don't necessarily need video for the long version because the conversation that we're having works without video. Again, you should watch it with the video because there's two very good-looking people on this podcast. But if not, then it's still two smart people on this podcast, so you can listen to them. And
And there's a fly sometimes going
there's a
around
fly
your flat.
sometimes. Yeah, that's really I've seen it too. Yeah, you could see the fly. It's kind of like a little gimmick because in our tool everything is transcribed also. You can repurpose the written content for blog posts, for also what are kind of like the messages that are in there that I can repurpose to write my next postings, or maybe there's some interesting questions in there that I can use and say like, hey, what should be a follow-up podcast? Who should I be talking to? There's a bunch of stuff that then AI can do and repurpose the written content to a ton of stuff. Or just take the whole thing and say, hey, I want to have this in German, French, um, I don't know, whatever language you think of, and do an automatic translation into a different language and have that as a podcast or as an executive summary ready. So in that pyramid of, content production, you have the long form with the video, and then you can repurpose it into probably this episode into a month worth of content.
And see, I think that's also a really good case of how to use AI because at this point I am sick to death. I don't care if it takes me longer. I'm going to do my content myself because they've released an MIT study and like I think you have 38% less brain function if you're just using AI and you just like you yourself just start copy pasting. So it's like create the content yourself and then use AI to help automate the distribution. I think that
Ex-
is
Exactly. And like I said, and if you think about communications teams, especially internal communication teams, they are always usually always low on resources, either like team sizes or the resources that they have. So going in, recording something authentic that we do, and then having all those core messages in there, and then they don't have to go in and the AI can give you suggestions on what is good snippets. You can always use other parts as well, but it already gives you kind of like you're not starting on a blank canvas. You're starting with a few things already, and sometimes 80/20 rule is good enough. Sometimes I just need something. It will help me to identify certain things because I just don't have the time. Then it's great. Like, but it gives you a starting point, and then I can get into the groove. So I learn about it, and then I can adjust it and become better of using AI as a gadget and as a helper for me to create content and finding again that specific voice that I'm looking for. But yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you that if you just go in and try to create everything from AI, you're just gonna get to a very average level of content quality, and then you just can it can be subsidized by any brand name because everybody can do it, and then it's just plain and boring.
I think it is brain rot too. Like, I'm like, "Okay, everything's done really quickly. I did 10 times the amount, but it's just, like, mediocre."
Exactly, and I think that's again, podcast a great way of like think about you have if you're a big company, you maybe have 10, 20,000 people in your organization that have stories to tell, that have experience, life experience. There's so many good stories in there, and think about like if you go back and think about the different conversations over lunch that you had with colleagues, there's always a moment, or at the last summer party or Christmas party, there's always somebody that you meet randomly that you haven't known from your organization, and then you're like, oh, that's what you do, this is your hobby, oh, you have done this. Or there's another great story where it's like, bringing those stories to life, that is the essence of your organization, because in the end we can all have the same great tools. Every company in the end can use staff base that makes it really easy to have the foundational level, but then the content that goes in, there should be a human touch to it, and that's the people in your organization, right? And it's the same with, we can have a great podcasting tool, but if there's garbage going in what we speak into this microphone, the best tool doesn't help you to get it to a great level. So it's like the tools are great, but we can all get them, so there's no differentiator in that. But then the people that I hire for my organization, the people that work in my organization, they in the end kind of make up what is why other people want to join the company, why my customers are, they're in a people business, why they buying with us, because in the end they feel like, hey, I trust that person. So bringing out those stories in the end, that's where you need to go in, and podcasting is a great way of kind of exactly bringing that out.
I think people actually do want internal podcasts because when I said,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is our third staff-based podcast we're doing today, the You've Got Comms," and someone was like, "Oh, are we doing an internal podcast?" When I mentioned a new podcast, and I was like, "No, but that would actually be pretty cool. I would like to see." Like, I know our CEO, he said something like to rally us. He was just like, not like "fuck yeah," but he did say "fuck," and he was just like "let's fucking do it" or something. Everyone was like, hell yeah, like, we like to see the CEO kind of, like, let loose a little bit and
And be
show that
human, and
he
be a human, like,
that
because
he's,
he
like,
is exactly.
rallying.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. So I think there's a strange perception of leadership being perfect all the time. I can't make any mistakes and all that. Where it's like, I think people are not looking for that. They rather have a CEO where they understand, hey, he addresses issues. He has emotions when he is excited. Like I've been watching a bit of like Steve Ballmer content over the last few weeks. And to me, it's like he's jumping across stage, like the former CEO of Microsoft. So he's jumping across stage like a crazy person. And he's super excited about stuff. So if you think about it, at the time where he was the CEO, it's like that was not seen of, but it's that worked for him. It doesn't work for Bill Gates. It didn't work for Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs did a very different approach, but I think they all found their own. They were very close to their personality, and they were showing emotions, and they were showing like, I'm totally behind this. I love this, and maybe I don't know what to do with this, and you know what, this is where I failed, and this was a fuck up or something. I think that's what people want to see, because they want to work for that human being and not like this over, huge kind of like fake CEO type that never fails, always wears a suit, is always kind of like robotic. People are not looking for that anymore. And I think that's what leadership needs to understand, that the way we shift as a society, it becoming more informal. I think you have to become that in your communications as well. I like the first time I used emojis in a WhatsApp message sending to my boss, but when I was still, working as an employee, I felt like this feels so strange, and this feels so like I'm crossing a boundary. Today, like WhatsApp as a channel in communications is widely accepted, and emojis and reply gifs in a corporate context, those used to be the gamers doing it, and now and the nerds, and now reply gifs are like they're in Teams.
Yeah, in
They built
Slack, you save your own
into Slack as
emojis.
well.
Everyone,
Exactly.
yeah,
So everybody does emojis. So 10 years ago, that wasn't, thought of. Like that was impossible to think about that. So
that's very true. I saved all the Always Sunny in Philadelphia like reactions as like Slack reactions, and then I
it's my
use
favorite
those, and
TV
it's
show,
like,
by the way.
oh,
It's
nice,
my
nice,
favorite TV show.
culture.
Yeah, exactly. But, thinking about that we're becoming a bit more informal, it's not just leaving away the tie in your suit, but it's the way you communicate. Because in the end, like successful product launches, successful hiring, successful team management always comes down to how do I communicate this? Transformation is like why are so many transformational projects are struggling to be successful because we don't understand how to communicate correctly. Use the tools to do that and learn about communications. It always feels like, yeah, we all know how to speak, but we don't know all how to communicate.
I was gonna put you on the spot and be like, "Do you have an example of really bad corporate communication?" But I just saw one the other day. It was like Mark Zuckerberg, and he was doing a presentation to Meta people. He was just like, "And we are on an animals theme, and we will go with the animals theme and do an animal for our next thing." It was just really robotic and like uninspired. So I was like, he's definitely not known to be inspiring, but can you think of the opposite end where you're like, "Wow, this was an amazing corporate message?" I think you had an example before that even it was about the Ukraine war.
Yeah. So one of our customers, E.ON, a huge energy company in Europe. They in the energy sector, right? So when the war in Ukraine started, it was a huge, huge topic on many levels. Because they have a team in the Ukraine, they have the energy, like the gas coming in via the pipeline from Russia. So there were what is happening on an operational level as an organization, what is happening to our team in the Ukraine with that, and eventually what is happening to me as a person working here? Like, how does this affect me? How does this war affect me, like working here, but also as a human and everything? So, they were looking to react fast, and they were looking to react, addressing all those topics where they didn't know yet, but they didn't have all the answers yet, of course, because it was just, happening back, in when it started. And also they said we can't just go out and send emails to everybody because it doesn't really, reflect on that this is a very emotional topic, and we need to kind of like calm everybody down and kind of tell them where we're at. So they created a podcast, an internal podcast around that topic to cover those aspects, and also to continuously update on what is happening on the things that they were able to say, and let them know what they didn't know. And of course there were a few things that they couldn't talk about at certain times, but they also addressed that, and that is still one of their most successful internal campaigns that they ever did, to address a topic. And even though uh, it's a very emotional topic, it's super sad that we have to use this as an example of a good way of communicating, but it does happen. And we do have those moments where tragedy happens, and where things are very uncertain, and then finding the right way of addressing an entire organization in different countries, and kind of that is a great way of how you manage this. And because you are like as an organization a huge part of an individual's life, you usually, or most of the time, you cover on average 8 hours a day of your life. And if you think about the other 8 hours I sleep, then I have 8 hours of free time. So 1/3 of the day is I'm going to spend with my employer, so you're going to play an important role. So I'm going to look to you for information as well, and I look for you for you know a lot of things, trust, and security and safety and all that. So understanding that is really a key thing of drafting your communication around certain topics.
That was so nicely said, but now I really have to get this reference in. We said this last time, and it's if you don't understand yet the case for podcasts, you have to look up the Key and Peele sketch, text confusion, and then see that what you're trying to say doesn't always translate. Someone's like, "What's up?" And someone's like, "Oh, what's up?" Like, what's their attitude? So I think that's
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
best
I love
way
that sketch.
to connect with people and serious topics, just let people know what's going on. But also, I think was it you who mentioned this? Like someone said it was just a podcast and it was like the CEO eating pizza or something. And it was just
Yeah,
like really casual. And it's like people also want that.
yeah, 100%. There's another great example of it's a coating company, like coating,
All
the
right,
paint,
paint.
like in
Yeah.
paint, like the coating of like buildings and stuff like that. So
Coating.
coating, yeah, yeah, yeah. He does a podcast where he does his Friday pizza run for the family. Has the phone and like a clip-on microphone, like you have, in his car, drives to get pizza for the family, and while he does that, he gives an update to the organization saying like, "Hey, it's Friday, week is over. What was important this week, and what are we looking for? Like, what is going to be important next week?" And then in the meantime, this week, I'm on the diet, so I'm getting salad. The girls want, I don't know, a pepperoni pizza, and my wife is opting for, wants to be a bit adventurous and goes for, I don't know, pineapple or something on pizza. So it does the humanization of him, showing him as a family person, as something that you can relate to. Eating is something that we all do. So and then I can also squeeze in like, hey, how was the week? Do a recap of like the week, and so I can listen in and say like, oh, that was going on in the organization because you might have been in, buried in a project, and you didn't have the eyes to look around what was going on in the organization. And we often have that feeling of like, I'm so swamped with what I have to do, I don't have time to catch up, so I don't know what's going on, so I feel disconnected. So because I'm always feeling like I'm in that hamster wheel, and never get any chance to look left and right. And that's what companies complain about as well. That's why they thought, hey, we need to bring everybody back into the office. I don't think that's how you solve this issue of feeling disconnected from your organization. It's, I'm super swamped with everything I have to do, and I never understand, you know, what is happening in the rest of my organization because I never have the chance to speak to anybody. So such a small project. It's so easy to do it, but it has such a big impact because it covers so many things, and then it also gives you the 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 view for next week, so you always understand what are the priorities of my superiors, right? So I can kind of like, I can always do an adjustment of what I do and say like, hey, does this kind of like play into what our CEO's vision is going for? Like, am I working on the right project? Do I need to reset my priorities? Because if they're saying like, hey, we're focusing on, I don't know, expanding in Southeast Asia, and then I'm just drafting a plan to do expansion in, I don't know, the Middle East, then it's like, maybe I need to kind of like rework my priorities. So there's so much in that small little piece of content that they're working on, and it's so easily done. To and I think it's also a great example of where podcasts work really well.
I would say definitely maybe since the start of the pandemic, and then now there's just so much other stuff going on in the world, and everything. So people are really sick of seeing celebrities or seeing influencers or seeing rich people being rich. And I think they kind of just want to see normal people being normal. Like, hey, that's what my coworker Steve, that's his dog. That's like the book he recommended, like just showing this human side. I know Henry Schein, one of the staff-based customers, they were like, they have a dog page and everyone loves that. It's staff-based. We bring our dogs to work. So it's like people just want this like, hey, that's that person's dog connection. So I would say people are overthinking the accessibility of podcasting. It's probably a lot more accessible than they think. So as a final question today, if let's say I'm a comms team of one, I have a really low budget, I never got started on podcasting, what would you tell me to do?
I would firstly ask, like, it's a podcast, like, why do you want to do it? Like, what is the reason for you doing a podcast? Because maybe you give me a reason where I would tell you, don't do it then. because they're like, for some cases it's like, hey, I want to sign up new customers, I want to use this as a lead generation tool, then I would be like, there's probably better ways to do it. But for internal comms, yeah, why do you want to do it, and then who do you want to address? Is this really the most critical group of people that you want to address? So where do you have the most need to communicate? Maybe what community is underserved at the moment? And then what is it that you want to talk to them about? Part two of that question is, what do they actually want to hear? Because it might be different to what you want to tell them. And you should always focus on what they want to hear. And then you can, if you establish a medium that they want to hear, then it becomes relevant to them. Then you can think about weaving in what you want to send. But don't think like, I have this information, I want to send this to this person, and so I'm doing, like, send them an email, that's fine. But that's why people don't react to emails, because you assume, like, just because you send it, that they want to read it. Same with listening. Focus on what they want to hear and not on what you want to send. And then if you understand what they want to listen to, understand if you have that content to provide to them. If you don't have it on your own, find somebody who has it and let them do the podcast. As a comms person, you don't have to do everything. You can also be the person empowering others to do it.
Tell my manager.
So, uh, yeah, well, that's
No,
exactly, like,
I started
that's
off as a writer of the podcast episodes, and then I come on as the host, but I do like trying both
Yeah,
sides.
but that's the thing. Like, yeah, you can write it, and then it doesn't always have to be the same
Yeah.
person. Like, you can be helping them to find their voice, and it can be somebody from the sales team, or it can be somebody from HR, from wherever. It doesn't always have to go through that, like, bottleneck internal comms. If you're already low on resources, then you're gonna get in, like, and we do have cases with customers that then say like, oh, I don't have even time to do it. Yeah, but you don't have to be the person on the podcast. Find somebody who loves to do a podcast, and use them to be a representation of your company. So, final example, I was working with L'Oreal when, and that was the reason we were looking for solutions why I started this company. So I was a co-host in a podcast. The CMO team was doing a podcast. I was working in e-commerce, but I was a podcast fan. And so the CMO team always struggled with connecting with the marketing teams in the different divisions. So you had like the divisional teams, and then you had the CMO team. The CMO team always seemed like the team, like, sitting in their ivory tower, coming up with strategies that have no real world value, because the marketing teams in the divisions that were on the ground in the trenches, they knew exactly what was going on. So we always had that conflict going on. And so we said, okay, you know what? We have somebody from the CMO team and me. And just going to play a role as somebody from the division. And we have a conversation about, like, hey, this is the new thing that we want to do. And I'm going to ask you, like, yeah, but how should that work for me in my division? What are you thinking about? So they had a chance to explain what they were doing. So you're bringing people together, and you're showing unity by using this format, and also challenging each other in the conversation of making, of understanding each other. Like, those would be the questions that I would be asking you from a division side. These are the questions that I would be asking you from a CMO side, that you have maybe 15 times a day anyway. So we kind of recreated that scenario as a podcast, and it worked really well to kind of like get people to be engaged. So I wasn't part of a marketing team, but I love podcasts. I helped them with it, and I just played a role in that. So, you can be a host of a show.
Yeah, later today we have a recording, and I wrote this episode, but someone else was recording it because she just like perfectly fits in with a guest. And I love then when I'm
Exactly.
behind the scenes watching it, they put their own spin on things, but she's super, super busy person. So it's like I gave her a bunch of notes, I gave her questions, and then she takes it from there.
Hopefully not just a written out script.
No, not a written script. But I'm like, yeah, I know I can get to for both. So I'm like, okay, write
Okay.
everything down, pare it
Yeah.
down.
Nice.
And then I love it because they're just like, okay, she gave me so much prep, but I was like, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna ask questions, I'm gonna ask my own follow-ups. I love hearing and seeing that.
And that's perfect. So you prepare them really, really well. And then usually in a corporate context, people just generally know what they're talking about when they talk about a certain topic. And, usually when they are well prepared, they feel safe of, just having a conversation. So I think it's a great example that you're giving as well. And so it becomes very easy to get into podcasting, and then using the right tools, making it integratable. So, that's why we integrate our software with you, because we don't want to open up new channels. So it becomes easy to distribute it. So I think this is a blueprint of like how easy it can be to start a podcast. And it doesn't have to be like the huge studio with like 14 different camera angles, a 900 euro microphone, and all that kind of stuff. Like, you can start very simple and easy and still come up with a great quality product.
Yeah, my best advice would be we have like 6 hosts for the other podcast, and I always pair the guest with a host when there's passion. Like, it's always on purpose who hosts which episode. Like, for example, we had to
Nice.
re-record this. If I was like, I didn't feel passionate about this conversation, I don't wanna come in and re-record it because, to be honest,
Makes me feel very happy that you
yeah.
came on the podcast with it, like, or like, it would have been terrible if you, like, for the second episode, is like somebody else sitting here was like, "Yeah, I did
No,
the first
yeah,
one.
they
Yeah,
they they were like,
I don't have
"We have to
passion
re-record
anymore."
it. Do you wanna do it, or we could put someone else?" It's like, no, someone else came and Max, you were really boring the first time. I was like, "Yeah, we
Yeah,
talked about
yeah,
witty and
exactly.
clan,
I
we
would have
talked
known.
about
Yeah,
Key and Peele." I was like, "I can
no,
come
we
in a
did.
second time." So I think a real connection,
Awesome.
a real better word
Yeah.
for vibe, but a real atmosphere. So as we
Yeah.
wrap up now, where can people find more about Hypecast?
Well, they can go on hypecast.one on our website. They can reach out via LinkedIn, or via Instagram. We can even drop my email and phone number if they want in the show notes, and they can reach out if they want to. I'm writing a weekly newsletter. It's called the Mic Drop, on audio, and you can see me on stages or at events at the Voices or somewhere. Feel free to reach out, or just if you want to connect about podcasting, I always love to talk about it. And yeah, thanks for having me. That was a great conversation. It was a lot of fun. And even though it's hot outside, it wasn't as hot as in the podcast van that we were sitting in. Oh,
I
well
can't live
done,
without
well done.
this in Germany.
But can I ask you one final question?
Yes.
What is your favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast? Dang. My head's just completely blank at this moment. I have to say the one I do, Aspire to Inspire, but I really like because right now the one we're curating for Staff Base, I think it's really cool with the guests. And my 3 favorite episodes, like this isn't like bullshit, it's like passionate. Joe Navarro, we had the former FBI agent on, and he talked about nonverbal communications, and I was like, it's so cool for me right now to see this guy who I admire. The recent Obama speech episode, and Dr. David Burkus. I was like, these people coming on, they're spitting facts. It's a really cool conversation. These are admired people, and they're just sitting down and talking for an hour. And I thought that was really cool to hear.
By the way, you mentioned FBI. They have a corporate podcast.
Really?
The FBI, yeah, they have a podcast just to kind of engage people and show them what they are doing as an institution. So there's a podcast that they have. I don't know if they still have it, but it's interesting that you, as an organization that generally doesn't is out in the open and talks about a lot of stuff, to have a podcast to kind of like show people what you're doing, to understand, hey, this is employer branding, this is also community building, again, stakeholder management. Like, there's probably a bunch of people that are interested in what am I as a taxpayer paying money for, and what are they doing. So they want to make sure that you understand why the FBI is relevant and that they're doing a great job. So they started a podcast. So, even if you don't want to be out in the open, a podcast is still a great way to convey
Oh, it
messages.
reminds me
So that
one more
was,
thing. When I learned German, I was listening to German podcasts. So like Die Zeit magazine, or
yeah.
newspaper. I listened to their podcast. I was like, okay, now I'm learning German by listening to people talking. I had to slow it down a little bit for some of them, but I was like, this was very helpful.
Oh, very good. Yeah, so it's edutainment. Perfect. That's what podcasts are
There
great
we
for.
go.
So yeah, go out and listen to a podcast. It's always fun. There's so much good stuff out there. Uh,
Maybe we can link some of your favorite podcasts on LinkedIn
oh
as
yeah,
well to share.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 100%. Thank you so much for having me, Emma. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And this was You've Got Comms, and we hope that you guys join us again next time.